Travis Wayne Goodsell. Okay, as promised, the connection between an LDS church and Lucifer. I hope I don't need to go over how to identify what is contained in Lucifer's organization. You don't look for the outward appearance for the Church of Lucifer. I hope you're not that naive into thinking that, even though there is such an organization with that title. But I hope you're not naive in the sense that the true Luciferian church is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so I hope I don't need to go over the Book of Mormon and Moses chapter 4 verses 1 through 4. The Book of Mormon uses flattery, pacification, deception, and causes anger. Contention is of the devil. And contention is not saying, hey, the facts are this, and you go, no, they're not, and you get angry because you debate science and facts and truth. That's not contention. That's one person's ignorance for ignoring truth. But Mormons love to throw that one out when they're losing an argument. They retreat into, I don't want to contend. Well, yeah, because you're losing. So I hope you know the difference between contention and losing an argument. And you're supposed to be sound in your argument, using facts, primary sources, logic rather than fallacy. That's what a good argument is. And it's not a heated debate, Bible bashing, or any kind of unsound, fallacious argument. I hope you understand about the Book of Mormon talking about the elements of Lucifer's church, from Laman with his claims to being the tribal leader, to the great and abominable church, being filthy rich, neglecting the poor, harlots, and King Noah is discussed in Mosiah chapter 29, that he got rid of the previous priests, put in his buddies, surrounds himself with friends who will support him in committing crimes as they commit crimes, and oppress the people and suppress the rights. And Mosiah talking about taking away agency as his plan. And so agency consists of the three areas: life, liberty, property, similar to the Constitution. So if you take away somebody's life, you've taken away their agency. You take away their liberty, you've taken away their agency. You take away their property, you've taken away their agency, and thus committed crimes. That's what Lucifer's organization does. It's criminal. Hopefully you've been paying attention to my other videos talking about Joseph Smith being of the York Rites, with the Knights Templar and the background of the Knights Templar, with buried gold plates in Egyptian, so that I don't have to go over church history with you as well. And so I was going to look up Tom Hanks's character in Dan Brown's movie series. He is Robert Langdon, yeah. And so if you've watched The Da Vinci Code with Tom Hanks by Dan Brown from his books, Robert Langdon is a symbologist. As I have deciphered Paleo-Hebrew, which completely destroys William Foxwell Albright's belief that Proto-Sinaitic is the older script, and that it's Semitic in origin, and that somehow the Greeks created a new language in and of themselves. No, Proto or Paleo-Hebrew, or also called Phoenician, is the origin alphabet. No, not Proto-Sinaitic. And so it's not as old as people are claiming it is. But interesting fact, Dan Brown came to Utah to check things out back in the 2000s after Angels and Demons, as he was looking for something for his next book, but he passed on using Utah as his topic. But I've since had to write it, the real history of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. I can't remember exactly the title. And I've done videos, also including updates to the book for a second edition being necessary. So I myself am a symbologist, but even better, I am a decipherer of Paleo-Hebrew, and that enabled me to decipher Egyptian petroglyphs. So I hope I don't need to go over those with you, as this video is, I think I'm getting close to 800 now, according to YouTube. I took notes. Was it? I think it was. When was it? Yeah, I think it. Well, because I think it was. I did. Yeah, I think it was the previous night. Took notes, and then it was near the end of yesterday, as I had written it all out on paper. And so I hope I can follow all the arrows and things to cover here. Yeah, sit right back. This is going to be a long video, because we're going over everything. I think I start with holiness to the Lord. So let me bring up that picture for me to look at while I'm talking about it, and hopefully I'll remember to put it in here for you. I had moved it into another file so that I can access it quicker and easier, I thought. Yeah, there it is. So you can watch this for family home evening, even though Nelson changed it to Sundays, but Mormons kept practicing it on Mondays. Let's enlarge this. Okay. Alright, so you'll notice on the Holiness to the Lord parchment, this belonged to the Smith family, Smith Sr. family. He had obtained this after having been a part of the New Israelites in Vermont. The New Israelites were a Congregationalist type religion. You'd have to read the book to go over Congregationalists and what they believed. But he never became a member of the Congregationalists. You have to be selected by the members currently in order to become a member, and he was never found to have been a member. Membership involved becoming a polygamist, and there is no evidence at all that he even became a polygamist, and therefore he was only interested in some of the features of the religion, had no interest in polygamy, as the Book of Mormon 3 times denounces polygamy, and 2 it was a chapter in the 1835 edition, not sections. So he had 2 chapters that discussed monogamy as how to get into exaltation in the celestial kingdom. And I've talked about how Brigham Young took out the monogamy one, replaced it with section 132, which says that polygamy is now essential for exaltation, as he removed also the parts in section 131, which was the other chapter that talked about monogamy, as he's talking with a couple, and it's just gone, didn't put it in, or took it out rather. And so that's what's going on. And I've already gone over how Brigham Young is involved with the Scottish rites rather than the York rites, and how the Scottish rites were infiltrated by the Illuminati. But that's what we're going over in more detail today, is how the Illuminati are Luciferian. Literally. They claim they are Luciferian. So we're going to go over that. You'll notice that there are, in the four corners of the inner square, there are 4 pentagrams. They are not inverted. They represent a star chart. Stars in the heavens in the 4 coordinates of space. And therefore it's understood as a star chart. And that's what all the symbolisms in between are referring to, is a type of star chart language in symbolic form. You'll notice that there's an almost completed pentagram, and the upper, in the northeast quadrant, because I can't say the upper right, because the smaller star is there, but you can see that there's a bigger star because there's 4 and then one thing in the middle. It's almost like a pentagram as well, but you notice none of the signs are inverted pentagrams. Joseph Sr. was not into Satanism, Luciferianism, demonology, none of that. So you need to understand that this is his interest in interpreting the signs in the heavens, and has nothing to do with spells to demons and necromancy and all that stuff. The concept of communication with the dead, as Joseph Jr. is attributed to talking with resurrected angels, that was all symbolic. There was no actual communication with the dead. And that must be understood, is that he was speaking symbolically, metaphorically, as Hebrew, which Joseph Sr. was also involved in with Jewish mysticism. So he learned Hebrew with the New Israelites as well, and was involved in Jewish mysticism with the New Israelites, and that's why he has a star chart. Solomon has star chart books, and so he would have been familiar with Solomon, as Masonry has the Temple of Solomon, with their passion play of the murder of Hiram Abiff. And it's clear that Joseph Sr. was involved with Freemasonry by 1800, as he names his son Hiram, spelling it the same way. Court documents, for example, show that Hiram's legal name is spelled as Hiram Abiff, not the current one that is currently being used. Hyrum. It was actually Hiram. The 1838 arrest, for example, documents him as Hiram, and everybody missed it. He's listed, but nobody talks about, oh, that's Hiram. He was also arrested during that time with his brother, Joseph. Everybody misses it because they don't recognize the spelling. And that was the intention of changing his spelling, was 1826 with William Morgan. And so this is why there are signs in the heavens being referred to with the Smiths. On the 21st of September 1827, when they got the plates, the golden plates, buried in the ground, which came from Knights Templar, not the magic folklore of the period, which anyway came from Knights Templar anyway. The sign in the heaven, if you go to your stellarium.org, and you can download it or you can watch it online. It has those options. The download depends on your computer system, and download yours. If you've got a Windows 10 that's somewhat new and can have the storage space, get the 64 rather than the 32. You can go back to that date, and you can see the sign in the heavens, and you can go, hey, that's very close to Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. Yeah, that's what they were thinking of. And as I've been talking about, Joseph Sr. was trying to set Joseph Jr. up as the man-child, the man like Moses, as understood in Judaism, especially Jewish mysticism, as a man like Moses who is to come in the latter days, save the Jews, physically save, not spiritually heavenly save, because they already have a God, but physically save on earth by restoring the kingdom of David and restoring the religion. And that's who the Jews are looking for. That's what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was setting Joseph up for. And that's why the first president in the first presidency, the president of the church, is a man like Moses, in that office like Moses. And then section 103, Zion will be redeemed by a man like Moses, as there will be a return to Zion and Jerusalem to restore the kingdom of God on earth. And he was murdered. And so it's not him. So it's somebody else in the future with the correct sky sign from Revelation 12. But that's what the Knights Templar were all about, and Dan Brown goes over it, the royal blood. They made it a woman. No, it's a man. But he took it was Ron Howard, wasn't it, who did them? He made some Hollywood film liberties in the movies, straying from the book, and then Dan Brown altered the books to conform with the movies, which is kind of a bummer, because if you can get the original Angels and Demons book, that was far better than the movie version. The Da Vinci Code, who cares? But I think the Da Vinci Code, or was it Angels and Demons? One of them had the penises on the military shoulders. I had deciphered that before reading the book, which went over that and showed the picture of it. I went, holy crap, he just confirmed what I deciphered from Paleo-Hebrew. That's the Gimel, as it's called in Semitic Hebrew. Yeah, I was like, cool, somebody else knows about it. Do they know all of them then? Or am I actually the decipherer? But apparently I am the decipherer. But it was kind of cool to see confirmation of that. And so, let's see, four-corner pentagram, star symbols. Okay. So you notice that there's a common theme also in the Book of Mormon about a specific date. 600 years from the time Lehi left Jerusalem is that date that carries through, and then Samuel the Lamanite, even though they knew 600 years from the time Lehi left Jerusalem, they were still going, hey, when is this date? The year hadn't gone by and past yet, and the actual date was in spring. So what's going on? Why do they have to do the whole thing about the enemy of the Nephites saying, hey, if the date doesn't occur on this day, we're going to kill you, and then that just happens to be the day? So Samuel the Lamanite saying that there's going to be a sign, and that also is coding in the Book of Mormon, as Joseph Smith Sr. understood the whole tie to the signs in the heavens, with the Knights Templar also knowing the signs in the heavens, and the Scottish Rites Masons. And then, I should go over that right now because I didn't put it in here, I don't think. Okay, so 600 years from the time Lehi left Jerusalem, or the first year of the reign of King Zedekiah. Why was it the first year of the reign of King Zedekiah? Because Babylon came in, conquered Jerusalem, and placed their puppet king on the throne of Jerusalem. This is crucial in understanding the warning message by Joseph Smith Sr. in the Book of Mormon, and why there's talking about 600 years from that time will be a sign in the heavens. But it's not the coming of the Jesus of the Gospels, as that is it's a fiction tale, literally, because they use the context of the Roman period and place a fictional character who was prophesied to come, and who the Jews were looking for, hoping he would come during the Roman period to save them on earth. No such Messiah saved the Jews on earth. The character even dies, failing to save the Jews as prophesied. As Matthew says, thus was fulfilled by the prophet, thus was fulfilled by the prophet, thus was fulfilled by the prophet, then he dies, failing to save the Jews and restore the kingdom over the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire continues on, and into Constantine and beyond. And so that's why the Gospels are a myth. And so 600 years from 597. Now I know that Wikipedia says that there was one other person that was arguing, and it doesn't matter because the Smith Sr. was going by 597 as the date. How do we know this? Because in 4 AD, 600 years from 597, there was a sign in the heavens. A total solar eclipse over Russia, from Finland into Russia. St. Petersburg is the closest city that I can find in my stellarium to illustrate it. So in the Middle East, in Egypt, Jerusalem, even Babylon, it would have been seen as a partial eclipse. This is why everybody, all religions, all cultures that originated from the Middle East, which includes Christianity, all have that symbol to this day. Communism has it. It's the crescent, the bright crescent, thus a partial eclipse. Some people turn it on its side, some people have it below. Just depends where you lived in relation to where it occurred. And so if you were west, where it started, it would appear as a smile, and then as it goes, I think it would, well, I don't know. You'd probably have to be further up. Well, no. Anyway, they may have done some alterations over time. It's been almost 2 millennia now. But Islam, Jews, Christians, and you still see it in businesses. They utilize that same symbol. CBS, they have an eye. Well, it's also a eclipse. That's what an eye also corresponds with, as the Egyptians understood that an eclipse of the sun represented the government of the right eye, and of the left eye, religion. Eclipse of the moon. And so, star chart with a regular star, pentagram, referring to the 4 corners of the heavens. And so, no Satanism at all in that. And so, 600 years was the Smiths indicating that this date in 4 AD was the sign. Now, as a Knights Templar, they knew of southern Illinois to be the crossing of the 2017 and the 2024 total solar eclipses. And the Knights Templar knew it, the Smiths knew it, and so they understood the one in 4 AD to be the emergence of evil. Vespasian didn't show up, and I was going to talk about him. He doesn't show up. He isn't born until 9 AD, but he's responsible for destroying the Jews, destroying the Temple of Jerusalem, just like when Babylon destroyed it. So too did the Romans under Vespasian. But Josephus helped him become this Christ whom the Jews were looking for to save them. And he instead stabbed them in the backs and murdered them and destroyed the temple. And so Josephus sort of was a Judas in that respect. And so understand that the theme of Babylon conquering Jerusalem, putting a puppet king on the throne, and then a follow-up destruction. It was 11 years until Babylon was destroyed. And so, yes, Nephi was at least, or at most, 10 years old when he impersonated Laban and murdered him by cutting off his head. So understand the symbolism here. Nephi is a man-child symbol and is not intended to be an actual character from history. And so, and that theme of going to a new Jerusalem, as Lehi leaves Jerusalem, goes to the top of the Red Sea, New Jerusalem. Then his sons go back to get the plates before Jerusalem gets destroyed by Babylon. So then they have to leave the top of the Red Sea. They go to Bountiful, straight across in Saudi Arabia. in the monsoon area. And then that now becomes the New Jerusalem. But then Nephi says, hey, we're going to take a boat and sail to a New Jerusalem. And so they go across the boat to a New Jerusalem. And that's supposed to be America. They don't say America. They don't say where in the world it is. Everybody just assumes it's America. But it is understood as America because that's where the gold plates were buried by a long since dead warrior, knight, to warn about the destruction of New Jerusalem in the land of America. That's what the Knights Templar were planning for. That's why they came to America in 1363 and bought the land from the Mandan tribe Indians and had buried plates at the crossroads of the eventual total solar eclipses in southern Illinois. That's why it's called Little Egypt. And this was all Knights Templar, which is in the highest rank of the York Rites. Okay, so even the Book of Mormon, right before the coming of the Messiah to save the Nephites on earth, you have Jacob, meaning usurper, takes over the throne of the Nephites, as the Nephites are divided into tribes. And that's supposed to be a warning to America, which are united tribes or states, but there's the threat of a king being placed on the throne of the presidency of the United States that will divide the states into various tribal states. Not a coincidence. And thus, Babylon putting a puppet king on America, and then some years later, the destruction of America. Yeah, I've gone over this. It's Trump. He's the puppet king put on the throne by Russia. Russia was where the total solar eclipse occurred in 4 AD. Karl Marx, communism, to promote for Russia. Albert Pike says we will pit fascism versus communism. Fascism will lose in the Second World War I have planned. Communism will then dominate the world, but then will destroy Christianity and atheism and replace it with the religion of Lucifer as we take over the government of the world with monarchy and fascism again. And so, yes, the United States is a part of that, getting taken over, as if you've been paying attention to the news all these years, fascism has been taking over all of the countries throughout the world. Fascist dictators. Even in Europe. And so that was the threat that was intended with the Illuminati. And then the Book of Mormon was talking about it. And so, yes, Russia has the seal of the Scottish Rites, which is the 2 eagles. America took the Illuminati seal with 1 eagle, and then the pyramid and the all-seeing eye. And so, yes, Putin put Trump as the puppet king on America. And now Trump is destroying America. All predicted, all planned, premeditatedly. This isn't prophecy. This was planned by humans, and the Smiths knew about it and warned us. He stopped it in 1826, but knew that it was going to come back, and he knew the plans on how they were going to do it. And yes, they know of the signs in the heavens from Revelation. It's available for anybody to see. Anybody can know the date if you know astronomy. And so, that was the next thing to talk about, Vespasian. Okay. And the Book of Mormon Code did not save the Jews. So, Jesus in the Gospels needs to be understood as a prophecy for this man, Son of Man, that even Jesus says. In 24, read it. He's talking to his disciples, and he talks about the coming of the Son of Man, Son of Man, Son of Man, sign of the Son of Man, Son of Man. And so, Jesus is all about the Son of Man, not him. He was being used as a character in the context of the Roman period to talk about a future Son of Man, a man like Moses, a man-child, as John talks about in Revelation 12, which is actually male child, technically, correctly translated. And so conquering and destroying the temple, that's all part and parcel of this threat in the latter days. Joseph wanted to have the temple built in southern Illinois in his 19 July 1840 speech, which Brigham Young just would not put in his Doctrine and Covenants, because it also talks about Joseph's Last Supper comments, saying that I have Mormons in this audience who want me dead, and says this, that he says, is it, you guys will say, is it I, referring to the Last Supper. And so, if you saw Family Guy last night, they did a Bible version. Okay. And so, if you're wondering as Christians about Constantine, well, Constantine conquered Jesus and the temple yet again, but this time in a spiritual sense, because the temple had already been destroyed and the Jews weren't saved. But now Constantine comes into the picture, deceives Christians who are in essence Jews, but the Jewish Christian group just disappeared from existence as the Alexandrian Jews from Egypt became the more dominant group. But there were others up in Turkey and northern Israel that were also a part of this, and Rome as well. As Constantine took over the church by uniting all the churches by extortion, the Roman Empire will not pay your churches to exist unless you come together as one church under me, and that's the Nicene Creed. And so they had to decide on one creed for all the churches, and came up with the Nicene Creed, and they couldn't decide on who God was. They were divided. And I've told this before, and you should know it. It was Homoousios. Constantine created God. He replaced the Jesus of the Gospels that all of them knew and said, your Jesus is now Homoousios. And so he created a God for them, an idol. And he said, your God was living in Jerusalem, and he failed. And so we're going to have a dismissal of Christ. Christmas. That'll be his birthday. and he went around Jerusalem and the surrounding areas saying, this is his birthplace in Nazareth. This is the Golgotha where he was murdered on the cross, and this is his tomb, and so on and so forth. That was Constantine, the great scam in history. Because John's Revelation talks about Jesus being crucified in Egypt. There are no commas in Greek, but even still, the comma after the sentence, partial sentence after Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord also was crucified. If he wanted to have it attached to Jerusalem, he would have put in the great city where our Lord was crucified, which is like unto Sodom and Egypt. It's placed wrong in the sentence. And so, as written, Egypt was where Jesus was crucified, not, as the Gospel says, in Jerusalem. And Matthew does a little fake out in his storyline, because he says that Jesus is born in Jerusalem, in Israel, and then has to add in a section about how Joseph gets a dream, has to take his family to Egypt, which is the exact same story of Moses, right? Children being murdered, so they have to leave. Goes to Egypt. The Hebrew midwife, or the Hebrew mother, puts Moses, her son, in an ark, and then he ends up in Egypt with the Pharaoh's house. And so, yeah, that's where he got that from. And so Jesus, according to the prophecy, comes out of Egypt. But he had to say, no, it's from Jerusalem. And so he added in the story of how Jesus got to Jerusalem as a child, to say, thus was fulfilled. So no. No, because the character of prophecy originated in Egypt. That's where the whole thing originates from. That's the origin of religion, Egypt. And I've gone over that. Horus and his father Osiris. Horus is the man-child, the man like Moses. Osiris is the one who is murdered by his brother. And thus the Last Supper, you break bread in remembrance of the body of Christ, Osiris, whose body was broken by his brother, and then tossed into the Nile River. And thus you drink red wine or water to symbolize the blood spilt into the Nile River for the sacrament, or communion for Catholics, as it's called. Let's see. And so Constantine, yeah, he totally conquered the whole story of Jesus. Took him out of Egypt, placed him into Jerusalem context, called him Homoousius as a new idol god. And let's see. Star chart. Where do we go from here? Okay. So I think we can now go to inverted pentagrams. I think. Yeah. Okay. Like I said, notes are all scattered. I can show you. And so we're already at 45 minutes almost. So the inverted pentagram is a turning upside down of the pentagram star, which refers to a star in the heavens. And so when you invert it, it's a fallen star. That's where Isaiah 14:12, Isaiah 14:12, how art thou fallen from heaven? And it's the English comes from the Greek for Lucifer, but in Hebrew it's Hallel, and I'm jumping ahead of myself here. But an inverted pentagram has a completely different meaning. As I mentioned, it's a falling star, a fallen star. You'll notice that in the prophecy of Joel, sun shall be darkened, moon turned to blood, stars fall from heaven. Fallen stars. And it's carried over into Jesus talking about it in the last days signs, and John the Revelator talks about it, and John goes into more specific detail in chapter 12, where he gives us the date for this falling star. Star shall fall from the tail of the dragon. Constellation Draco, the quadrantid meteor showers, which occur at the beginning of the first week of the year, in our calendar year. It wasn't their calendar year, and per se, sort of, kind of. They had two calendars going during the assumed time of John the Revelator. That's why you use the stars to render dates for a future or a past or even current time period, so that anybody can identify the precise date if the calendar gets altered again. The stars are universal. You can date things by the stars and it will be fixed. Whereas calendars are created by man and can change according to the way they design it. And so what you have in John chapter 12 is calendar dates. Also, I almost forgot, the sign on 4 AD, total solar eclipse over Finland and Russia, that was prophesied in the Old Testament. Remember the story about Abraham taking his son Isaac up the mountaintop? And as he's about to sacrifice him, an angel appears, messenger, technically, and says, "You are faithful, you don't have to sacrifice him." A ram then appears. A ram is associated with sacrifice. Guess which constellation the total solar eclipse occurred in 4 AD? In the ram constellation of Aries, with Mercury, the messenger of the gods, in conjunction. So that's also important to understand, that it was prophesied in the Old Testament, not just from the Book of Mormon identifying that specific date. Okay, so as a fallen star, that's understood as Lucifer, as a light bringer, light bearer. And so the Illuminati took this symbol of the inverted pentagram, calling it Lucifer, because Albert Pike likewise says we're adopting the Illuminati practices and plans as Scottish Rites Masons, because we've been infiltrated by them, and we are going to replace the religion of Christianity and destroy the Jews, destroy Islam, and we're going to replace atheism and Christianity with the Church of Lucifer, the religion, the pure doctrine, he says, of Lucifer. And so Illuminati is connected to Lucifer through Albert Pike as confirmation. Interesting, on the 21st of August 2017, Monson's birthday, and when the quadrantid meteor showers were going on January 2nd, 2018, what happened to Monson? At 10:01 p.m., while they had begun falling from the heaven, Monson dies. Not a coincidence. Very weird, though. Because how do you plan for that unless they poisoned him to die? Which may not be far-fetched, because they were already implementing a number of stuff in December, especially, having his signature attached to stuff when he was on his deathbed. And then we find out in the first April conference of Nelson, oh yeah, we've been making a deal with Russia, we're going to have a temple there. And then Max Roth of Fox 13 News Utah in May finally said, oh yeah, we found out that in January the church had established LLC corporations and funneled $32 billion through them into the stock market. A double money laundering. $32 billion. What happened at the end of 2017 to allow the church, or have the church being urgently needing to have Monson die so that they can implement this deal with Russia? Remember Orrin Hatch getting in a fight with Senator Brown, the Democrat, talking about the tax bill, and Senator Brown saying this doesn't help the poor, and Orrin Hatch gets all emotional and angry. I was poor! This is for the poor! Yeah, well, he lied. Orrin Hatch, Mormon senator from Utah, the third in line for the presidency at the time. And, yeah, it wasn't for Trump, it wasn't for the rich, it was for the church. He's Mormon, he was doing it for the church. And rushing to get it passed because Trump wanted it rushed, because the church wanted it rushed, so that they can make the deal with Russia for a temple, as they do a favor, though, for Putin. I've gone over all of that. But this is all tied in together. This, how the church is satanic, the church of Lucifer, is why all this is happening. And we're getting to 52 minutes. Should I do a part 1 and part 2 for you? Can I take a break here? Maybe I could. Maybe that's what we'll do. Well, this is part 1 then. So that we'll redo Lucifer with the falling star symbol when we come back. And then we'll talk about how it's associated with Venus and go on from there. And Babylon even is involved.